Good afternoon. It's Thursday, February 5th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open in Jordan, where King Abdullah is reportedly considering a ground offensive against Islamic State in neighboring Syria and Iraq. The public outcry over the gruesome murder of a Jordanian pilot is palpable, and the king is vowing to unleash what he called an earth-shaking response to the pilot's death. IBA's Margot Dudkevich has this report.
The Hashemite kingdom is seething over the horrific murder of the Jordanian pilot. Amid public calls to intensify action against the Islamic State, reports out of Amman suggest among the options being weighed by King Abdullah is a ground offensive. Shortly after his return from Washington yesterday, King Abdullah met with the military echelon to discuss the country's strategy. Political analysts in the kingdom appear somewhat divided over a fitting response to the pilot's death, including whether the country has the capability to fight ISIS on the ground.
It depends on many factors and circumstances. If they have the ability to defeat Daesh, IS, I think they will not hesitate to do it. But I think it is a tough manner, and they have to study it carefully and to take the feedback and the result and outcoming of that participation.
Simply, we have to wait and see what's the strategy. If it's the same unclear strategy, American strategy, I think we will be expecting more confusion. The Americans should be much more transparent and clearer in their vision and objectives. You cannot keep having uncertain and unclear strategies while terrorism is being expanded.
Thousands marched in the streets of Amman yesterday mourning the pilot's death and demanding the government crack down on ISIS. Many expressed horror and disbelief that Muslims are capable of carrying out such a gruesome act.
It's horrible, and I think this is our world turning into, like, I don't know, like a battlefield.
That's not really what Muslims do. What our Prophet did before for a prisoner, that he would teach him, he would give him food, he would let them learn their style. But if that's ISIS, your style, burning people in a cage, it just really doesn't make sense.
What I mean exactly is fighting ISIS through the international coalition. If we don't fight this battle today in Syria and Iraq, you never know, we might be fighting this battle in our capital or in any other Jordanian city.
In a state television address, Mohammed al-Momani, Jordan's Minister of Media Affairs, said the country will intensify its efforts with the coalition to fight ISIS and bring about its defeat.
Jordan has been working with coalition members in order to stop extremism and terrorism, and will continue to do so. And our strength and ability is known to everybody, so Jordan will continue to do that, and any further steps will be announced in the appropriate time. We believe extremism and terrorism is a threat to regional peace and security, is a threat to the Jordanian national security, and that's why our effort and our determination continues to be the same, and this is the history of this country, and this is the nature of the people of Jordan.
Jordan is an integral part of the US-led coalition fighting ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Some say it will quietly increase its participation in the coalition and at the same time remind its citizens why it is in the fight. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
ISIS is attempting to buy off some of the Bedouin tribes inside Jordan in order to create unrest against the king. That's the view of former ambassador to Jordan, Oded Iran, who told IBA's Margot Dudkevich the notion of a Jordanian ground offensive against ISIS is a matter for the U.S.-led coalition to decide.
For the time being, I think that it's only a matter of planning, because there's no direct frontal attack on Jordan by ISIS. The danger to Jordan doesn't come from that angle. The danger to Jordan is from slow creeping penetration into the centers of dismay, resentment because of unemployment, because of poverty. And so a frontal attack by Jordan on ISIS is something which is a matter for the coalition to decide after consultation with the United States and other participants in this coalition.
Jordanian pilot that was brutally murdered by ISIS was a member of the Barashe tribe, considered the backbone of the monarchy. How much internal pressure is King Abdullah facing?
He's facing quite a lot of pressure ever since the Arab Spring, which has disappeared, but ever since the beginning of 2011. As you said, from the centers of, or the backbone of the support for the kingdom among the tribes, the Bedouin tribes, mostly south of Amman towards Aqaba. As I indicated before, there is a lot of poverty, unemployment, resentment against these conditions, which are used by ISIS to try and buy off some of the tribes, some of the leaders and militants among these tribes. This is the major threat, and this is what the king and the government have to deal with.
Now, some are accusing King Abdullah of being weak. He's also being criticized for participating in U.S. coalition strikes against ISIS in Iraq and Syria. How much support would he have from his people if he anyway decides to go ahead with a ground offensive?
This is a very good question, a very delicate situation for the king, because in a recent poll taken in many countries, the United States appears in Jordan as the most unliked state in the world. That is to say, Jordan tops, or is number 2 in this poll in terms of resentment against the United States. On the other end, the king and the Hashemite regime in Jordan have no option but to deal with ISIS from the very beginning, because the more ISIS spreads in terms of territorial control or popular support, the more difficult it will be for the kingdom to deal with this threat.
The United Nations condemned in the strongest terms the killing of a Spanish UN peacekeeper last week on the Israeli-Lebanese border. The Spanish UNIFIL soldier was killed when Israel responded to Hezbollah firing anti-tank missiles at 2 IDF vehicles, killing 2 soldiers and wounding 7 others. The Security Council failed to condemn the Hezbollah attack, which set off the Israeli response. Due to Russian opposition, the Council blocked a French-drafted motion that would have condemned the Hezbollah attack as a violation of the agreement that ended the 2006 war. Israeli UN Ambassador Ron Prosser issued a terse statement saying that the Security Council seems to think that some lives have more value than others. Israel has expressed its condolences to the Spanish government, and the UN has launched an inquiry into the incident. If Iran were to acquire nuclear weapons, the national security implications for the United States would be exceptionally grave. This according to Ashton Carter, U.S. President Barack Obama's pick for Secretary of Defense, who was grilled yesterday by Republicans in the Senate. Expanding on Iran, Carter said they have the ambition to wipe Israel off the map. They have a long history of behaving in a disruptive way, of supporting terrorism, of trying to undermine other governments, of operating around the world. They are not the kind of people you want to have nuclear weapons. Carter was also asked to explain the administration's strategy to confront Islamic State.
A strategy connects ends and means, and our ends with respect to ISIL needs to be its lasting defeat. I say lasting because it's important that when they get defeated, they stay defeated. And that is why it's important that we have those on the ground there who will ensure that they stay defeated once defeated. It's different on the 2 sides of the border. It's one enemy, but it's 2 different contexts. Mr. Chairman, in Iraq, the force that will keep them defeated is the Iraqi security forces. Our strategy is to strengthen them and to make them that force. On the Syrian side, not to take too long about it, we are trying to build the force that will keep them defeated, and that's going to be a combination of moderate Syrian forces and regional forces.
Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Ron Dermer, and Knesset Speaker Yulia Edelstein held talks with leading congressional Democrats in an effort to calm the storm on Capitol Hill created by Prime Minister Netanyahu's pending speech on the Iranian nuclear issue to a joint session of Congress on March 3rd. Dermer and Edelstein met with 7 Jewish Democrats who all reiterated concerns that the speech was making them choose between their president and Israel, forcing them to consider a boycott of the speech and making support for Israel a partisan issue. The Democrats are reportedly torn between supporting Israel and supporting President Obama, who has announced that he will not meet with the Prime Minister in Washington because Netanyahu's visit will be just 2 weeks before the Israeli election. Now the White House says that Vice President Joe Biden may absent himself from the speech.
Well, I can tell you that the Vice President's schedule for that week has not yet been set. So as we get some more details worked out of his schedule, we'll be able to let you know whether or not he'll be able to attend that joint session.
But would the President want the Vice President to be there?
Well, again, this is going to be contingent on his schedule. And as I mentioned, there's only one time in which the Vice President hasn't been there, and it's when he's been out of the country. So as we get some more details for that first week in March lockdown on the Vice President's schedule, we'll have more to say about this.
Just one more on that. Do you think it's dangerous? There are some Democrats who are talking about skipping the speech. Do you think it's dangerous for American-Israeli relations for Democrats to potentially boycott the Netanyahu speech?
Well, certainly individual members of Congress will have to make their own decision, some of which I assume will be driven by their schedule, and some of it will be driven by their own views about what has transpired over the last several weeks as it relates to this speech. Let me just say as a general matter that when I was asked about Ambassador Dermer's status a couple of, maybe it was just even last week, that the President believed that it was important to uphold a broader tradition of ensuring that the strong relationship between the United States and Israel was not in any way subjugated to partisan politics in either country, frankly. And, you know, we have one of the concerns about the breach in protocol that we've seen and articulated is that it might cause some to view the relationship between the United States and Israel as a relationship between one political party in Israel and one political party in the United States. The President does not believe that would be a positive development in our relationship. And so the President is certainly doing everything that he can to try to avoid that. And that, in fact, that is one of the reasons that the President has said he will not meet with the Israeli Prime Minister when he is in town the first week in March, because the President does not want to leave anybody with even the appearance of interfering in the Israeli election that's scheduled for just 2 weeks later.
The number of anti-Semitic incidents in Britain hit an all-time high last year. This according to an annual report issued today by the Community Security Trust, which has been tracking anti-Semitism since 1984. The 1,168 incidents recorded last year were more than double the cases of anti-Jewish activity in 2013. The report cited the 50-day-long Gaza war last summer as the main factor behind the record number of cases, although the report also said there had already been a 38% increase in anti-Jewish incidents even before the war began. The report pointed out that the number of violent attacks was also larger. Speaking in the House of Commons, British Prime Minister David Cameron told MPs that the government was committed to contributing funding for protection for Jewish schools and that he was already in discussion over funds to help guard 120 Jewish communal buildings. Thousands of Argentinians took to the streets of Buenos Aires once again to demand justice and an end of impunity in the 1994 Iranian bombing of the Jewish Community Center, in which 85 people were killed and some 300 wounded. The rally came as a respected Holocaust expert, Judge Daniel Rafikas, reluctantly agreed to take over the case that has shaken Argentine since the mysterious death of lead prosecutor Alberto Nisman. The case became even more complicated when it was revealed that Nisman had drafted an arrest warrant for President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner before he was found dead in his apartment with a gunshot wound to the head last month. Fernández de Kirchner is suspected of covering up Iranian officials' involvement in the deadly bombing. 3 judges recused themselves from the case before the federal authority ordered Rafikas to take on the task. In addition to his Holocaust expertise, Rafikas is renowned as a human rights expert and tried military officers for abuses committed during the Argentinian dictatorship years between 1976 and 1983. Further embarrassment in the Israeli police as yet another high-ranking officer came under investigation on suspicion of sexually harassing female officers under his command. Chagai Dotan is the commander of the Coastal District and is the 7th top police officer to be investigated for wrongdoing since 2013. 5 policewomen have given testimony regarding instances of alleged sexual harassment by Dotan. He has been suspended from the police force for the next 2 weeks and is prohibited from contacting his peers during this period of time. Commissioner Yochanan Danino said that he views the string of recent scandals with the utmost severity and the behavior will not be tolerated. Turning to elections, and Yisrael Beitenu is petitioning the High Court to overturn a Central Elections Committee decision banning the distribution of Charlie Hebdo. And a new survey shows that a majority of first-time voters are leaning to the right. Here with more is Eli Wagelenter.
The head of the Central Elections Committee, Supreme Court Judge Salim Joubran, issued a decree late yesterday prohibiting the distribution of the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. Accepting the petition from Combined Arab Party list, Joubran said that distributing copies of the last edition in campaign material wrapping printed with criticism of MK Ahmed Tibi would constitute election propaganda by way of giving voters a gift which is explicitly prohibited. There is no doubt that this is a gift in every respect, Joubran ruled, and the special cover wrapping the issue, aside from the issue itself, is clearly election propaganda. Tibi expressed satisfaction over the decision, calling it a victory of sanity over extremism. Yisrael Beitenu called the Central Election Committee's decision a surrender to terror and announced that it would appeal the decision to the High Court of Justice. Even if the reason given for not allowing the distribution is procedural, the Central Elections Committee's decision is a submission to terror, to the threats of the Arab parties, and is a harsh blow to freedom of expression, the party said, adding that it sends a very bad message that gives way to threats and subordinates Israeli democracy. Liebman had instructed party activists to hand them out for free after Israel's main bookstore chain, Sametsky, decided not to sell the edition in its shops but only online due to fears of Arab retribution. Voting, meanwhile, a new survey reveals that first-time voters are leaning right. Polls conducted by the Midgam Institute over the past few weeks among Jewish voters only found that some 67% of first-time voters define themselves as either right-wing or center-right, with 17% backing Likud and only 9% saying they will vote for the Zionist Union. The survey also found that most of the public trusts Kulanu chairman Moshe Kachlon over other candidates when it comes to economic issues. According to the poll, Israelis believe Kachlon is best suited to handle Israel's housing crisis, finding a solution for the cost of living crisis in Israel, and is the best candidate for finance minister. Whether that translates into mandates is yet to be seen. Laura?
Thank you, Eli. By the rivers of Babylon has long been a catchphrase to express the Jewish people's 3,000-year longing and attachment to the land of Israel. Now, the Bible Lands Museum has opened a new exhibition showcasing the latest archaeological finds, documenting the powerful history of expulsion from Israel following the destruction of the First Temple, exile in Babylon, and return of the Jewish people. We get more in this report from Alexandra Jen.
In a breakthrough discovery, archaeologists have identified over 100 clay tablets. They serve as further evidence of the daily lives and identities of exiled Judeans in 6th and 5th century BCE. The Al Yehuda tablets piece together a puzzle some 2,500 years old, providing additional proof of stories from the Bible, giving a voice to the Jews in Babylon. The tablets appeared about 2 years ago in an antiquities market. David Soffer, a private collector, discovered them and generously offered them to the Bible Lands Museum. Amanda Weiss, the director of the museum, speaks about the importance of the tablets.
For me, it's the story of the survival of the Jewish people, because it's both the biblical text, the extra-biblical sources that we have as reference, and it proves the historicity of the Bible, but it also tells a very individual, very personal, very dramatic story.
A story that was incomplete until now. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon destroyed the first temple in 586 BCE that had stood for more than 400 years as he conquered Jerusalem. The Judean king and his family were taken captive, and his wives, officers, and notables were exiled to Babylon along with the rest of the Jewish people. The Judeans remained there until 539 BCE, when Cyrus of Persia conquered the Babylonians and allowed the captives who desired to return to their homeland. And now, after 2,500 years, we can fill in the missing pieces of the story. how the Jewish people lived their lives in Babylon between their exile and liberation.
Finally, we have a complete picture, complete story, complete movie that we can simply tell to everybody what happened to those Judeans that survived the exile, the tragedy, the relocation.
The Al Yehuda, or Judaville tablets, are inscribed in Akkadian script, one of the earliest known forms of writing. They tell stories of business, of trading fruits and other commodities. They document financial records like taxes, debts, and credit. And they include the names of the people involved. One family over 4 generations is included, beginning with the father, Samak Yama. All of his boys have Hebrew names still used today. The exhibit, appropriately named By the Rivers of Babylon, is now open and will run for the next year. Alexandra Jen for IBA News.
The Bad Boys of Ballet are back in Israel, and once you've seen them perform, you'll understand the name. The young, sexy, and charismatic troupe features 6 male and 1 female dancers who take traditional works and breathe new life into them. They kicked off 7 years ago in New York, and since then have taken their Rock the Ballet show around the world. Some critics call them simply Chippendale dancers because of the partial nudity, but millions of fans would disagree with them. It's a new take on ballet to the tunes of Justin Timberlake and Coldplay, to name just a few. Rock the Ballet 2 will take to the stage in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa. Taking a look at local finance, and the shekel strengthened in foreign currency trading, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were also up on the last day of the trading week. Here's a look at the mid-afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team says temperatures will rise significantly tomorrow, and it will be warmer than normal for this time of the year. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours at home and abroad. And that's all for this evening. I'm Laura Cornfield. Aaron Viner will be here tomorrow with all the latest news from Israel and abroad.